Another one would be just for strategic purposes, an incumbent at the time trying to distance themselves from their predecessor. Or there might be a history to it where they didn't agree during the presidency of the guy who left. So, and then when it comes, depending on the dynamics that are at play, either politically or socially within the country, then the incumbent feels really that they really need to do something, either to move themselves away from the guy who just left, or just to show the people that they have never in any way agreed with the guy who was the president before them.
Right. I'm interested in knowing how it plays out if it's used as a political strategy.
Yes, it is for more often a political strategy. Look, this is what would happen. If there is a big issue of the day, if you take Botswana, for example, President Masisi really wanted to move swiftly into his presidency to distance himself from the guy who had given him the position. And he did it very forcefully. In many ways. It was a political strategy, but he also wanted the country to know that he did not agree with his predecessor, even as they were together in many of the decisions. Number one, in Botswana, ultimately, it is the president who makes the decision on anything that affects government. Ultimately, the buck stops with him. They would say there's a cabinet to advise him, but it is just that. They advise, and the president ultimately decides. In many instances, he overrules his cabinet, and because he's also the chairman of that cabinet, he appoints that cabinet. Nobody is going to question him. It has to be the nation itself that is taken into confidence to tell them what really transpired. And that is what, for most of the time, you see the guy who's just coming trying to do by taking a jab at the predecessor.
Right, right. Now, how does this, now come in and affect democracy or, governance and, political messaging in general?
I'll tell you, it soils the air for most of the time. That is what we saw. You can imagine President Masisi was in that very important position for about 7 years. And for those 7 years, he was literally trying to manage his relationship with the predecessor. Managing in a way, but it was basically fighting the guy. So that kind of derailed the country. That kind of took the government off the message. And for most of the time, people were trying to ask the president, who was Masisi at the time, really, what are you doing? Why do you even have to waste your time with the guy who does not have power, he had fled the country, number two. But look, Khama, if I may, was a very powerful president during his time. I would call him an imperial president. So you can't ignore him if you succeed him. Either you agree with everything that he said and even try to be his lackey, even as now you are on the seat yourself, or you really will go out as Masisi did. But the problem with it is that the man is still there. He is seeking power one way or the other to influence events. He had been, he's a royal, a very senior one for that matter, of a very big tribe in this country. So you can't ignore him. People were trying to tell Masisi, ignore him, ignore him, ignore him. But he knew that he could only ignore him at his own peril, because that would allow Khama to entrench himself even further. So it was a big risk that Masisi took, but ultimately, exactly what he had feared happened, which was Khama came in and removed him.
Right.
Yes.
Right. There's something that you mentioned back there that such an instant would soil, what really matters. I'd like for us maybe to, in that very instance, an example that you did use of the former President Masisi and, his predecessor, what had happened during his tenure there. Can we say that because of that, could it have been one of the things that played a role in now seeing him having lost his, seat after just one term? One of those things that just soiled everything else that perhaps he had put on the table or he had come to the table with in terms of furthering the country and, our economy.
Exactly, yeah. In this instance that we are talking about, we have a predecessor who is a very powerful person in his own right. He's the very guy who left, but still many people still believed in him one way or the other, especially his own tribesmen. So you really take him head on at your own risk, which is what Masisi did, and he paid a very heavy price. Look, and then I can give you the instance that recently played out where President Khama came out and said there's this tendency among presidents to always take a jab at him. And he seemed to have been complaining. And I said to myself, what is he complaining about? Here is a powerful man who has been president, a very powerful position. Here is a man who is still, in a way, seeking to influence events in this country. We saw him recently take on the Minister of Local Government. And Khama is a very powerful person, like I'm saying. And because of the attachment to the presidency in a way, people still call him former president, even as he's now a Khosi. You are not going to ignore him if you are president. So Boko was in a way trying to remind everybody that, look, somebody has to own up here because Chimbombi had been ill-treated, and he was ill-treated at Khama's time. There was no other way to put it. I think Boko was right.
And right on that very note, you know, I don't know, maybe there's a blurred line, you know, between constructive criticism and literal jabs.
Yes, yes.
Let's just dissect that a little bit, because I believe that with constructive criticism, we're trying to build, we're trying to hold, you know, one to account. Right? And then there's literal jabs. And sometimes I believe that we look at this or take it in at a personal level instead of looking at it as a way or grounds to see that there needs to be change here and growth there. Let's dissect that.
Yes, you are right. There would be constructive criticism. Sometimes it would be a joke that has been absorbed wrongly. But look, if you're talking about President Khama, he is a man who's really been through rough time at the instance of the guy he had left or given the power to. So he gets very worried. He has become very prickly, especially if a criticism is coming from a president. He had to run away from the country, literally, and spend years outside the country.
That's fragility there.
When a president takes a jab, minor as it could be, it reminds him of how it all started, and then he had to leave the country. So he has become very sensitive to it. But ultimately, he should never think anyhow people are going to forget that he has been president of this country. And he was not an angel, I must say, when he was the president. So people are going to remind him, and for as long as he's alive, he will have to live with it.
I'd like for us to perhaps just revisit how all of this can now affect, you know, the economy of a country, governance, you know, of a country, should it now go to, you know, to that point where we see what we've seen in that instance between the former president and his predecessor, Khama.
Yeah, I mean, it was, for Botswana especially, it was a very sorry tale. The institutions collapsed. If you talk about the judiciary, which, again, we have to give credit to President Boko because he has put it as among his priorities, it had collapsed, it was polarized, they were fighting amongst them. I'm talking about the judges, can you imagine? And it was all at the instance of the fight. Some of them had been taking a side with President Masisi and the DIS and everything else. Some were literally running behind Khama. So it killed many institutions. And it was not only the judiciary. Many other institutions, people were being sacked from positions, including especially civil service, because they were perceived to be pro-Khama. So it undermines institutions. For a country small as Botswana, it would, of course, undermine the economy. Yeah, and you can't say no about that. It does affect the whole thing. It soils the air, as we put it in the beginning.
Right, right. And then I'd like for us to maybe look into those subtle jabs. They're not so loud, but we see them in action that, you know, this person is actually distancing themselves from, you know, their predecessor and maybe perhaps the route that they had taken in different, you know, organizations within the country. Let's talk about that.
That is indispensable, that is inevitable for a man who is coming in. You want to exert yourself, you want to assert yourself, you want people to respect you in your own right, you want to prove that you are not the former guy's man, you are your own man. And the only way to do that would be not only to distance, but to also take subtle jabs at the guy. You see, that is natural. It is how the guy you are taking a jab at ultimately responds. If you take a person like former President Festus Mogae, it's not like people have not been talking about him. It's only now because he's a senior statesman that nobody really wants to take him head on for anything, because they would have to deal with the backlash, because now everybody loves him, you see, because he's been gone for many years. But ultimately, it happens, especially for the immediate predecessor. The guy who is just coming after him always wants to exert themselves. And what a better way to do it than to hit the guy who left and say, these decisions that I'm now having to sort out were actually taken by the guy who left.
Right,
Yes.
right. Maybe just to, look into the situation that is happening in Zambia right now, because it's, directly what we're talking about right now, right? Where we see that, the former has apparently spoke on how his predecessor should not even be in attendance of his funeral. And we've seen quite an unfortunate, situation unfold there, where he's been passed on since June, and there has been this struggle. In a situation like that, what happens in that situation?
That has become a very, very untidy situation, but ultimately it has a history to it. The current president, HH, while he was leader of opposition, he was terribly persecuted by Lungu, many times taken to prison, many times harassed and the like. So when he came in, especially in the beginning, he tried to reach out, but it was clear as time went on that Lungu never really had any soft spot for the guy, the family, and then when he died, they had also started fighting, basically even barring him, Lungu, from contesting again. So it was a very, very untidy thing, and it's still playing out to this day. I hear there's been a judgment on it, but look, that's an extreme way, I think.
Right. Well, just maybe to talk about, just wrapping up our conversation, just to talk about how earlier we did speak a bit about constructive criticism and how there's a thin line between that and intentional jabs to the other. Let's talk about accountability, the way that sometimes it's constructive criticism. I mean, if you look at it in an objective view, it is constructive criticism, and how the former would now take it as a jab instead of a form of taking accountability. Maybe let's wrap our conversation up with that.
The best way, I think, to suggest, the best way to deal with it if you're a former president is to accept that there's still going to be history written about you, and that history is going to be critical at times, and sometimes the writer could be your successor. In a way, there would be this narrative, this commentary running out of him or her at any given time. So the best way, I think, is to keep quiet, especially if you are not being persecuted, especially if you are not being hounded off the country. But what happened to Kama and Masisi, that's a different thing. But for now, President Kama should allow Boko to say whatever he says. He is the state president. And if he feels that things have been done badly, especially because the two are from different parties, so to speak, even as now the allies one way or the other. Kama used to be BDP when he was in power, but now, of course, he played a big role into bringing Boko into it. So it's a difficult thing. It would take a long time to explain it. But look, the short of it is that President Kama should allow Boko to say whatever he says, including allowing Boko space to criticize him if he has to.
Right. We're out of time. Thank you so much for joining us, Spencer.
Cheers.
Of course. Well, there we have it. That was Mr. Spencer Mogapi, communications expert, and on the topic of how we find that, sitting presidents have, sometimes throw jabs here and there to their predecessors, and we're just exploring that situation and getting a better understanding of how truly it plays out in a political sense. Stay tuned for the news at the top of the hour.
Welcome to beautiful Botswana, where the warmth of